The ocean covers most of our planet, and large parts of it are still a mystery. Beneath the surface lie missing planes, lost ships, strange glowing waters, and discoveries that still cannot be explained. Here are 15 still unsolved mysteries of the ocean. Number 15. The USS Cyclops. In March 1918, one of the largest ships in the U.S. Navy vanished on a routine voyage. The USS Cyclops, a massive collier nearly 550 feet long, sailed from Brazil with heavy cargo of manganese ore, stopped in Barbados, and headed toward Baltimore. The last message was calm, weather fair, all well. Then it disappeared. No distress call, no wreckage, no survivors. More than a century later, Cyclops remains one of the most baffling losses in American naval history, with more than 300 people aboard. It was wartime, so enemy action seemed possible, but no evidence surfaced. That left a disturbing vacuum. A ship that large, carrying that many people, simply failed to arrive. The Atlantic offered back no wreck, no radio distress, no final clue. Naval historians also note the ship had mechanical trouble, including engine issues. Structural weakness, overloading, unstable cargo, and bad weather became part of serious discussion. The Cyclops story is often dragged into Bermuda Triangle mythology, but the stronger record points to something more haunting: a ship under strain in open water, facing conditions that may have gone wrong too quickly for anyone to call for help. If a wreck were found, the debate might narrow. Without physical evidence, Cyclops sits in an uncomfortable space. It almost certainly suffered a real catastrophe, but almost certainly is not the same as solved. A vessel of enormous size loaded with ore, carrying hundreds of people, sailed away from Barbados and never arrived. In the strictest sense, that is still the mystery, not whether something happened, but what exactly happened in the last unseen stretch of ocean. Number 14. The Yonaguni Underwater Monument. Off the coast of Japan's westernmost inhabited island, Yonaguni, divers came face to face with something that looks almost designed. First noticed in 1986 by a diving tour operator, the main formation feels architectural even before anyone argues about what it is. Japan's official tourism site describes it as roughly 100 by 60 meters and 25 meters tall. Britannica says it has a stepped appearance, encouraging comparisons to a pyramid or ziggurat. There are terraces, edges, and flat surfaces that seem out of place on the sea floor. To some, Yonaguni looks like a submerged human-built complex. The visual impression arrives first, and certainty never quite catches up, but no consensus has established it as man-made. Britannica states its origin remains uncertain. Other researchers argue it was naturally created by fractures, currents, and erosion. Japan's tourism page says it looks man-made, but scientists estimate it is from a time before humans had the means to build such a structure. Yonaguni is not a disappearance. It's a question of interpretation. The structure is real. Divers can see it. Yet the central question has not gone away. Are people looking at natural sandstone formations shaped by erosion, or a place that preserves some degree of human modification? That unresolved gap between appearance and proof keeps Yonaguni alive as one of the sea's most enduring mysteries. Number 13. Franklin Expedition. In May 1845, two British ships, HMS Erebus and HMS Terror, sailed into the Arctic under Sir John Franklin to chart the Northwest Passage. The ships were strong and well supplied, but even now, after wrecked discoveries and decades of work, the expedition remains a real mystery because the final sequence of events is incomplete. The last confirmed sighting came in late July 1845 when a whaler saw the ships in Baffin Bay. After that, the expedition disappeared. Royal Museum's Greenwich notes, this was the last time any of the 129 crewmen were seen alive. These men belonged to a high-profile naval expedition backed by a great power. When communication stopped, the silence was total. No survivors, no ships returning. Search expeditions multiplied. Between 1847 and 1880, more than 30 ventured north. Traces emerged the first winter camp on Beechy Island and early graves, but they didn't explain the final disaster. Unlike many losses at sea, Franklin left no clear final logbook. The most important clue was the Victory Point note, found in 1859. It revealed the ships had been stuck in ice since September 1846 and were deserted on April 22, 1848. Franklin died on June 11, 1847, and 105 survivors set out on foot. That gave the outline of a catastrophe, but not the full story. It didn't explain how the final escape failed, or where the journals are. Royal Museums, Greenwich says researchers still don't have the logbooks. Then came major discoveries. Parks Canada says Inuit knowledge and technology led to finding Erebus in 2014 and Terror in 2016. National Geographic called it the end of a 170-year search. But the wrecks didn't produce a final solution. Parks Canada says there's still much to learn. Knowing where the ships lie is not the same as knowing exactly how the men died or what happened after abandonment. The broad outline is established: ships trapped, Franklin dead, vessels abandoned, no escape, but the exact human story is fragmented. First-person documents haven't been recovered. The role of lead poisoning and other factors are still debated. The Arctic returned graves, bones, a brief note, and 2 shipwrecks. It never returned the full record, and that missing record is the mystery. Between the last sighting and the broken remains found later, one of history's most famous expeditions still loses part of its truth to silence. Number 12. K-129. In March 1968, the Soviet ballistic missile submarine K-129 disappeared in the Pacific during the Cold War. The CIA's account of Project Azorian states the sub sailed from Kamchatka to take up patrol near Hawaii and was lost soon after. This was not a merchant vessel. It was a strategic asset carrying nuclear-armed missiles. After the Soviets abandoned their search, the U.S. located the sub roughly 1,800 miles northwest of Hawaii on the ocean floor, 16,000 feet down. Recognizing its intelligence value, the CIA organized one of the most ambitious covert recovery efforts ever attempted, Project Azorian, using the specially built Hughes Glomar Explorer. K-129 didn't remain mysterious because no one found it. It remains mysterious because, even after it was found, the reason it sank is still not settled. Later CIA discussions mentioned possible explanations, including that missile engines may have ignited, but those are still presented as probability. Collision theories, internal explosion theories, and attack theories have circulated, but public evidence has never produced a single uncontested conclusion. K-129 sits in a different category because parts of its story were buried inside intelligence operations. The public didn't know the full scale of Project Azorian when the recovery was underway. The CIA's own history emphasized the engineering miracle of trying to lift part of a Soviet sub from 3 miles down while keeping it hidden. That operation became famous in its own right, yet even all that engineering doesn't erase the original question: why did the sub go down? The mystery exists on 2 levels. First, the original disaster, then the attempt to recover evidence without revealing it was happening. The ocean held the wreck at a depth where certainty was incredibly hard to obtain, and the political world made everything murkier instead of clearer. Number 11. Flight MH370. On March 8, 2014, Malaysia Airlines flight MH370 disappeared during a flight from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing, with 239 people on board. Early searches focused on the South China Sea, but analysis showed the aircraft had turned south toward the southern Indian Ocean. From that point, the mystery shifted into one of the largest and most difficult ocean searches ever attempted. The Australian Transport Safety Bureau explains that satellite data was used to define the most probable search area on the seafloor. This wasn't a plane that fell near a coast. It was a jet believed to have ended in one of the most remote ocean regions on the planet. The official underwater search covered more than 120,000 square kilometers, and by 2018, the total reached close to 200,000 square kilometers without locating the main wreckage. Debris linked to MH370 was recovered on Indian Ocean islands and the East African coast, confirming the aircraft ended in the ocean, but it didn't answer key questions. Because the main wreckage, including the flight data recorder, hasn't been found, Malaysia's safety investigation couldn't draw definitive conclusions. That's the heart of the mystery. Evidence points to a broad region, but the central story is incomplete. The seabed has not given up the aircraft itself. The search didn't end there. In March 2025, Malaysia signed a new agreement with Ocean Infinity to search a fresh 15,000 square kilometer area on a no-find, no-fee basis. According to a Malaysian Ministry of Transport Families update issued on March 8, 2026, the renewed operation took place in 2 phases. The update says 28 operational search days were carried out, covering about 7,500 square kilometers of seabed, and it states clearly that these activities had not yielded any findings confirming the location of the aircraft. MH370 remains, in the most literal sense, an unsolved mystery. The ocean has preserved part of the answer and hidden the rest. Searchers know the aircraft didn't vanish into myth. They know debris drifted across the Indian Ocean, but until the main wreckage is found, the exact resting place and chain of events remain unsolved. Number 10. Flight 19. On December 5, 1945, 5 U.S. Navy TBM Avenger torpedo bombers left Florida on a routine training mission and never returned. The Naval History and Heritage Command states that no confirmed traces of the planes or the 14 men aboard have ever been found. Fragmentary radio communication suggested compass problems and growing confusion. Then a Martin PBM Mariner flying boat launched to search for them also disappeared, taking 13 more men. In hours, the Atlantic swallowed 6 aircraft and 27 people. Flight 19 is often pulled into Bermuda Triangle mythology, but the official Navy record is more grounded. The known evidence points toward navigational disorientation rather than anything supernatural. The lead aviator became uncertain of his location, and once the formation lost track of land, fuel became the enemy. Yet the case remains unresolved, because no confirmed wreckage has ever closed it. The missing search plane adds another layer. A rescue effort also went wrong almost immediately. Later explanations suggest the Mariner type had a reputation for fuel vapor explosions, which could account for its loss separately from the Avengers. But even if that explains one aircraft, it doesn't solve the location of Flight 19 itself. It is likely the patrol became lost over water, exhausted its fuel, and crashed into the Atlantic. That's the practical reading of the radio traffic and navigation problems, but the word likely matters. The aircraft have not been decisively identified and recovered as a group, so this remains fixed in history. 5 military aircraft circling over a darkened ocean, voices fading, then silence. And in that silence, the Atlantic kept one of its most famous secrets. Number 9. The USS Scorpion. On May 22, 1968, the nuclear-powered attack submarine USS Scorpion disappeared in the Atlantic while returning to the U.S. All 99 men aboard were lost. The Navy's historical summaries place the loss about 400 nautical miles southwest of the Azores, noting that the exact cause has never been conclusively established. This is not a case where the vessel vanished and was never found. The wreck was located on the sea floor, but even with a wreck site and years of analysis, the final answer stayed out of reach. The Scorpion sank during a tense phase of the Cold War. A modern, armed, nuclear-powered submarine didn't simply fail to report in. Its disappearance touched off a major search. The wreck lay deep enough that direct interpretation was difficult, and what investigators saw didn't produce a clean explanation. The ocean preserved the broken submarine, but not the sequence of failures that led to its destruction. Several serious theories exist. One is a torpedo malfunction, another is a battery-related explosion. The problem is not a lack of plausible explanations, but that none have been proven beyond doubt. Naval historians still describe the loss as unresolved. A 2025 summary stated that the loss remains an unresolved mystery more than half a century later. Unlike a surface ship, a submarine dies out of sight. No one watches it slip below the waves. One moment it existed, as a hidden machine. The next, silence. When the wreck was found, broken by the ocean's pressure, it confirmed the scale of the disaster without resolving the cause. Usually a wreck answers more questions than it raises. Here, it answered only one yes. The submarine was down there. The rest is contested. This was not an old schooner. It was a Cold War nuclear sub from one of the world's most advanced navies. It operated with trained crews and systems designed to reduce uncertainty, but the exact chain of failure remains uncertain. More than 50 years later, the USS Scorpion is a clear example of how the ocean defeats even modern technology. It took a state-of-the-art vessel, preserved its grave, and still refused to say exactly why it died. Number 8. The SS Waratah. In July 1909, the SS Waratah sailed out of Durban for Cape Town and never arrived. Built in Scotland as a passenger liner for the Australian route, it carried 211 people. South African History Online notes the ship left Durban on July 26th and was expected by the 29th. Instead, it vanished so completely that no confirmed wreckage was found, and no one aboard was ever seen again. What turned it into a lasting mystery was the total absence of evidence. No debris field, no bodies, no confirmed distress signal. The National Library of Australia notes that the loss led to a 4-month government search. This wasn't a minor coastal steamer. The Waratah was a major ship on an established route, and its loss stood out as extraordinary. Over the years, various wrecks off South Africa were suggested as possible matches, but South African History Online notes that candidates spotted between 1925 and 1999 were never proven to be the Waratah. The ocean kept presenting possibilities and then taking them away. Because the wreck has never been conclusively identified, the final cause remains uncertain. A rogue wave capsize became a leading theory after later research, but the mystery is still unsolved. There are plausible explanations, but no physical confirmation ties any one theory to the ship itself. In a strict historical sense, the Waratah is still missing. Many shipwrecks become less mysterious once divers locate the hull. Here, that final piece never came. The name survived. The passenger list survived. The departure date survived. The ship did not. More than a century later, the mystery still sits somewhere under the South Atlantic or Indian Ocean. A large passenger liner with 211 people entered one of the busiest sea routes and disappeared so thoroughly that even now the ocean has not fully returned its story. Number 7. The MV Joyita. On October 3, 1955, the MV Joyita left Samoa for the Tokelau Islands with 25 people aboard. The trip should have taken about 2 days. Instead, the vessel failed to arrive and was reported missing on October 6. Weeks later, it reappeared as one of the Pacific's most unsettling ghost ship cases. New Zealand reporting states the Joyita was found waterlogged and abandoned near Fiji, about 600 miles off course. No passengers, no crew, no clear explanation. What investigators found only deepened the puzzle. The vessel had a dinghy and 3 lifeboats, all missing. A 1956 inquiry found the ship in poor condition, but still concluded that the fate of the passengers and crew was inexplicable on the evidence submitted. That phrase is key. An official inquiry reviewed the evidence and still couldn't say what happened. This wasn't later legend built on rumor. Some parts are easier to describe than interpret. The vessel had mechanical problems and was in rough condition, but those facts don't answer the hardest question. Why would everyone abandon a vessel that was still afloat? And what happened after they left? The ship was not smashed on a reef. It was found alive enough to continue drifting across the Pacific without anyone aboard. That image is why the case remains vivid. A ship listing, deck empty, lifecraft gone, 25 lives unaccounted for. The National Library of New Zealand records describe the case as an unsolved mystery, noting that the passengers and crew were never satisfactorily accounted for. Decades later, people still push for closure. Unresolved maritime cases like this don't end when the search ends. They linger in archives, in families, in memories. The Joyita is one of the clearest examples a real vessel that left port, failed to arrive, and reappeared without a soul aboard, leaving behind an official conclusion that even after formal investigation, the central event remains unexplained. Number 6. The Carol A. Deering. In late January 1921, the 5-masted schooner Carol A. Deering turned into one of the Atlantic's strangest ghost ship cases. The Library of Congress summarizes it bluntly. All occupants disappeared off the North Carolina coast. When the vessel was later found at Diamond Shoals near Cape Hatteras, it appeared abandoned in a hurry. Spotted on January 31st with sails still set, the ship was empty when the Coast Guard boarded. No captain, no crew, no lifeboats, and no final explanation. What made the sight eerie was the sense that life had only just stopped. Food had been prepared but left untouched. Everything else seemed in order. 2 days earlier, the ship had passed a lightship, and someone shouted that both anchors had been lost, though there was no obvious sign of deeper distress. Then almost immediately, the schooner was found abandoned. That narrow gap between being seen alive and found empty keeps the case compelling. Newspapers tied the Deering to piracy, mutiny, and even the disappearance of another vessel, the Hewitt. The Library of Congress notes that connection became early speculation, but speculation is not resolution. The historical record still provides no settled explanation. It's not that nobody looked, it's that looking never produced a decisive answer. Few maritime mysteries are stronger. A giant schooner emerging through mist with sails set but no visible crew sounds like fiction, yet it happened in plain view of the coast. A comparison quoted by the Library of Congress captured the feeling a Flying Dutchman made real. The hard facts remain limited but powerful. The ship was found, the crew was gone, the lifeboats were gone, and a meal sat uneaten. That is enough to leave the Carol A. Deering among the most memorable unsolved ocean mysteries ever recorded in American waters. Number 5. The 52 Hertz whale. Long before anyone gave it a nickname, researchers listening to the Pacific through underwater hydrophones kept hearing a strange call. It didn't match the normal vocal range of the great baleen whales they were used to tracking. Scientists at Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution followed that sound year after year across the North Pacific. What made this case interesting is not just the sound, but its consistency. This wasn't a one-time error. It was a repeatable signal from a moving source that behaved like a whale, yet didn't fit any known species. The signal became known as the 52 Hertz call. NOAA describes it as whale-like, lasting roughly 5 to 7 seconds. A 2004 tracking paper followed a unique source over 12 years, with calls first noticed in 1989. Only one series of 52 Hertz calls was recorded at a time, so researchers concluded they were probably hearing a single animal. That alone makes the mystery feel unreal, an enormous ocean heavily monitored, and one voice unlike any other. The deeper mystery is that they still don't know what kind of whale produced the sound. The animal has never been visually identified or photographed at the moment of calling. Researchers have proposed possibilities, including a physical malformation or a hybrid origin, but those remain possibilities, not conclusions. Even the popular label, the loneliest whale, goes beyond the evidence. The recordings show an unusual call, not proof of isolation. What's simpler and stranger, a whale-like source with an unknown identity has been documented acoustically for years, and the reason its call is so different remains unsolved. No wreck, no vanished ship, no debris field, only sound, a moving signal recorded in the dark over thousands of kilometers. In a world where satellites watch storms and ships scan the seabed, the ocean still keeps secrets at the level of a single voice. Somewhere in the North Pacific, a whale once called in a way no one could fully explain, and the ocean answered only with more silence. Number 4. The SS Beichimo. The SS Beichimo was not mysterious because it vanished all at once. It was mysterious because it refused to disappear properly. In late 1931, the Hudson's Bay Company cargo steamer became trapped in sea ice near Alaska's northern coast. The crew prepared to overwinter in the Arctic. Then a storm came through, but when it cleared, the ship was gone, and the crew assumed it had sunk. Soon after, an Inuk hunter reported seeing it again, still afloat, and packed in ice roughly 72 kilometers from camp. That should have been the end. Instead, it became the beginning of decades of sightings. After the vessel was abandoned, people boarded it several times over the next few years and removed cargo, but the ship itself continued to evade final capture. The sightings continued for decades, with reported appearances slowing after World War II and then continuing into the 1960s. The last recorded sighting came in 1969 when the vessel was seen frozen in ice. After that, it was gone for good. This is a very different kind of ocean mystery. No one wonders whether it existed or was really abandoned. Those facts are well documented. The unknown part is its final fate. It most likely eventually succumbed to Arctic sea ice, but most likely is not proven. No confirmed wreck has ever closed the case. No final resting place has ended the story. There is something visually haunting about the Beichimo, a steel cargo ship drifting through ice fog, reappearing without its crew, boarded, left again, seen years later by people who could hardly expect it to still exist. It feels like folklore, except the records are real, and museums still hold items taken from it. That long fade into absence keeps this mystery alive, not how it was abandoned, not whether it drifted, but where it finally went when the ocean and the ice finished with it. Number 3. The Mary Celeste. In November 1872, the merchant brigantine Mary Celeste left New York bound for Genoa with 171 barrels of industrial alcohol. On board were Captain Benjamin Briggs, his wife Sarah, their young daughter Sophia, and a crew of 7. Then on December 5th, the British brig Dei Gratia found the ship adrift 400 miles east of the Azores. It was moving through the Atlantic, but nobody answered from the deck. When a boarding party climbed aboard, they found a real ship in open water, still afloat and intact, but missing every living person who had been on it. More than 150 years later, the fate of those 10 people is still unknown. What the boarding party found is why the case never faded. The crew's belongings were still in their quarters. The cargo was largely intact, with enough food and water for months. The only lifeboat was missing. One of 2 pumps had been disassembled, and there was about 3.5 feet of water in the hold. Yet the vessel was in good enough shape for the Discovery crew to sail it onward. It didn't look like a ship destroyed by violence, consumed by fire, or one that should have been empty, and yet it was. When the vessel was taken to Gibraltar, a Vice Admiralty court examined the case. Authorities suspected foul play, but after months of inquiry, no evidence proved murder, piracy, or fraud. The official failure to find a cause turned the incident into a legend. Over time, theories multiplied: pirates, mutiny, alcohol fumes, sea monsters, waterspouts. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle later amplified the mystery with fiction, pushing the real event deeper into popular culture. But the hard facts never became clearer. The ship was found abandoned. The people were never recovered. No final explanation was established. Modern researchers have revisited the evidence using weather data and drift patterns. Some argue that a chain of practical problems may have frightened Captain Briggs into a temporary abandonment that became fatal. But that remains an attempted explanation, not a proven solution. Quite a lot is known where it sailed from. When it was found, the eerie state of discovery. The mystery survives because the single most important piece is still missing. No one can say why an experienced captain would leave a seaworthy ship in the Atlantic, or what happened after that decision was made. Number 2. Amelia Earhart and Fred Noonan in the Pacific. On July 2, 1937, Amelia Earhart and navigator Fred Noonan took off from Papua New Guinea, headed for tiny Howland Island in the Central Pacific. It was the hardest leg of a round-the-world attempt, more than 2,500 miles of open ocean leading to a coral atoll, only about 1.5 miles long. 1 aircraft, 1 navigator, one small target in an enormous stretch of water. Somewhere during final approach, something went wrong. Earhart radioed a U.S. Coast Guard cutter stationed off Howland, saying she believed the plane was close but couldn't see the island. Her final message indicated she was flying a line that passed through Howland, but didn't specify direction. Then radio contact was lost. No confirmed crash, no distress flare, no wreck found, just silence over one of the largest oceans on Earth. 2 weeks later, the U.S. declared Earhart and Newhan lost at sea. The official position is that the Lockheed Electra ran out of fuel and crashed. That is grounded in known circumstances, but the aircraft has never been recovered. Their bodies were never found. Without decisive physical evidence, theories multiplied. Some said she crashed near Howland. Others proposed she survived as a castaway. Still others claimed capture elsewhere, but physical evidence for such accounts is scarce, and at least one famous photograph was later discredited. Multiple expeditions have found no universally accepted solution. Earhart was one of the most recognized aviators in the world. Her disappearance was followed immediately, and internationally, and still, the Pacific won. The final location is unproven. The most likely outcome may be that the aircraft failed to find Howland and went down, but most likely is not confirmed. Without the plane, without the crash site, the final minutes are unknown. The Pacific didn't just take a famous aircraft. It took the one piece of evidence that would have ended the argument. Until that changes, Earhart and Noonan remain part of the ocean's greatest unsolved mysteries. Number 1. Milky Seas. Sometimes the ocean does something stranger than hiding a wreck. For centuries, sailors have described nights when huge stretches of sea glowed with a steady white or blue-green light, not in flashes, but as a calm, uniform field stretching to the horizon. NASA says mariners describe these events as looking like a snowfield. Researchers call this the Milky Sea. It sounds like folklore, but the phenomenon is real. Even so, the basic question remains, what creates these enormous glowing fields? A 2021 study says they can exceed 100,000 square kilometers and persist for days to weeks. The 2025 Colorado State database compiled sightings across 400 years. The mystery is not whether it exists, but why it remains poorly understood. NASA says researchers believe Milky Seas occur when luminous bacteria explode in connection with certain algae. There is a strong hypothesis, but not a complete model. Milky Seas are rare, perhaps 0 to 2 times per year globally, and have eluded science because they're so remote. A 1985 sampling in the Arabian Sea and a 1995 event off Somalia exist, but the 1985 sample was just one data point. The 2019 Java event showed how strange these waters can be. The crew of the yacht Ganesha crossed a glowing swath south of Java on August 2, 2019. The logbook described the sea as white with no moon, giving the impression of sailing on snow. The ocean glowed evenly while the bow wave darkened instead of flashing. The bucket sample showed steady light that darkened on stirring, the opposite of familiar glowing water. A multi-year search yielded 12 Milky Sea candidates. In 2025, Colorado State compiled a 400-year database, combining sailors' reports and satellite data. They can now watch for events from orbit, but the progress sharpens the question instead of finishing it. It reveals where and when Milky Seas happen, but not yet why. The goal is to get research vessels to active events fast enough for real-time measurements. Until that happens, the ocean is keeping the most important answers. The ocean has offered clues: the glow, the timing, the bacterial hypothesis, the 1985 sample, the 2019 encounter, and the database. But it has not yielded the complete mechanism. The mystery happens in plain sight, across immense distances. A sea can turn into a glowing horizon-wide field under a moonless sky. And even now, the best answer is not a conclusion but an outline. The ocean is lighting up on its own surface, and it's still not fully explaining itself. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.